Let's finish section 1.3, the application questions. So where we're getting a verbal description where we have to model a scenario and we have to solve it using a linear equation. So let's continue on. So example 4, let's say we inherited $50,000 with the stipulation that for the first year, the money had to be invested in two accounts, one paying 0.9% interest and the other one paying 1.1% annual interest. So the question is, how much did you invest in each account, right, at each rate, if the total interest that you earned for the year was $515? So the way that interest works is if you take your money and put it into an account that's earning a certain percent interest, your money's going to sit there, and based on whatever percent that is, you're going to accumulate interest. So one account's going to pay 0.9% interest, the other account's going to pay 1.1% interest. Now, it doesn't say to split the 50,000 evenly. So I don't know how much I'm putting in each account. That's what we're trying to figure out. But we do know that we're making a total of $515 in interest for the total year. So that's going to help us solve to figure out how much money we're putting into each of the accounts. So let's just say we have the money, or let's just call it amount. So let's say amount invested at the 0.9% rate. And then we're going to have an amount that we're going to invest at a 1.1% interest rate. Now, remember, I don't know how much I'm putting into each account, right? So let's just say I'm going to put X dollars into the account that's earning 0.9%. So the amount that we're going to put in the account that's earning 0.9% interest, I'm just going to call it X dollars. Now, whatever's left over, right, out of that 50,000 that I deposited into the first account, I'm going to put in the second account. So it's going to be the difference, right? Whatever 50,000 is minus the X dollars that I put in the first account. So the amount that's going to get invested at 1.1% is going to be 50,000 minus X, right? The amount of money that I put into the other account. So we need to figure out how much did I put into each account, right? So in other words, if I figure out what X is, then I could figure out both these amounts. But I need to set up an equation. Now, I know that the total amount that I invested in account A, the one that earns 0.9%, plus the amount that I invested in the second account at 1.1% interest, right? If I were to add those two amounts of interest that I got from both accounts, it should total $515. Now, how do we take a percentage of an amount? Well, we multiply the percent by the amount, but we have to change the percent to a decimal first. So just a quick reminder, if I have 0.9%, to get the decimal form, we have to drop the percent and move the decimal to the left two places. So this is equivalent to 0.009, and 1.1% is equal to 0.011 as a decimal. You can't plug in a percentage into an equation. You have to plug it in its equivalent decimal form. So the interest that we're going to get in the first account at 0.9% is going to be equal to 0.009 times X, right? We're getting 0.9% of our X dollars. Now we know if we add the amount of interest that we got in the second account that's paying 1.1%, the total of the two interests, right, in both accounts should be equal to $515. So now I have to add to that 1.1% or 0.011 of the difference, the 50,000 minus X. And the total of those two sets of interest should equal $515. Now I could solve this equation for x. So let's distribute. So I'm going to have 0.009x plus, now let's do 0.011 times 50,000. So 0.011 times 50,000 is 550. Now minus 0.011 times x, and that should equal 515. Let's combine the x terms, right? Take 0.009 and subtract 0.011. So I'm going to get negative 0.002x plus 550 should equal 515. And I want to get x by itself, so I'm going to subtract 550 from both sides. So I'm going to get negative 0.002x equals 515 minus 550, which is negative 35. And now we could divide by negative 0.002 to get x by itself. So x is going to be equal to negative 35 divided by negative 0.002. And that's going to be equal to $17,500. And that X represents the amount that we're investing in the first account at 0.9%. So the question is, how much did we invest into each account, right? So in the first account, we invested $17,500. And now the amount invested in the other account that earned 1.1% interest was 50,000 minus X, or in this case, 50,000 minus 17,500. And that's $32,500. And that would be your answer. And let's do one more. So let's look at example 5. Example 5 says, the length of a rectangular basketball court is 44 feet more than the width. If the perimeter of the basketball court is 288 feet, what are its dimensions? Anytime I'm working with a shape or a figure, I like to sketch it. I just think it's easier. You don't have to, but that's what I'm going to do. So we have a rectangular basketball court. So let's draw a rectangle. And it says that the length, right? So I always think of the longer side as the length, the shorter side as the width. The length of the basketball court is 44 feet more than the width. We don't know what the width is. So let's just leave the width as W. And then the length is going to be equal to whatever the width is plus 44, right? Because it's 44 more feet than the width. So it's the width plus 44 feet. And this also tells me, so the length, we're going to write that in terms of the width as W plus 44. Now, we know opposite sides are equal, right? So the opposite side on the width on the left will be W, and then the top length is also going to be W plus 44. Now, we know that the perimeter of the court is equal to 288 feet. Now, remember, Perimeter is when you add up all the sides of the figure. So that means, so let's set up an equation using perimeter being equal to 288 feet, right? So if I add up all four sides, right, the W plus the W plus the W plus 44 plus the other W plus 44, right? So I'm adding up all four sides. That total distance around, or the perimeter, should be 288 feet. Now I have an equation where I could solve for W, right? So if we add up all the W's on the left, that's 4W plus 44 plus 44 is plus 88 should equal 288. Now let's solve for W, right? So let's subtract 88 from both sides. And we're going to get 4W equals 200. Now divide by 4. And we're going to get W is equal to 50, right? Because 50 times 4 is 200. So that means that the width of this rectangle, right, because that's W, is 50. And then the length is the width plus 44, 50 plus 44, which is going to be 94. And we're in terms of feet. So we have 50 feet and 94 feet. And to check your answer, right, add up 50 plus 50 plus 94 plus 94, right? Because you add up both lengths and widths, and that should be the perimeter, and they add up to 288. So again, don't forget to check your answers for reasonableness. So this wraps up section 1.3. In the next lecture, I'll cover 1.4, complex numbers.